Yeah, now you mentioned the kidnappings, and in your book, I think you talked about a specific type of express kidnapping. What is that? How does that work?
Express kidnappings are just ones that uh, two or three guys get into a car, they start driving around, and if they see someone that looks rich or looks as if he has some money, good clothes, at first you have to understand what happened before this. You have to understand that all of a sudden we had a society where 50% of the country is poor and 25% is below the poverty line. So you have maybe 20% left of middle class and well, maybe a bit more than that, and maybe 5 and 3% worth of people that have good money. So they are looking for that kind of folks on the streets. They're driving around, looking the way you're dressed, looking the way the type of vehicle you have. That happens a lot. They just burst into a restaurant and say, "Okay, we want the owner of that BMW out there. Who is it?" And they take that guy. Or based on your clothes alone, they pick you up and they just ask for maybe 3,000-4,000 bucks, something like that. And the idea of an express kidnapping is that it should be quick, it should be fast, and not so much money because they want the money right away. And what happens a lot is that if you go to a police station, they will just tell you, just pay the money and get over it.
Yeah, yeah, that's the reality of it. They're just probably overloaded with these things, and they can't respond to all of them.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about living in the city versus rural areas too, and I know that a lot of people on survival forums feel that the best way to go is to have a retreat, and I know there's advantages to that because you're not around as many of the bad people. But if the bad people know that there's opportunity out in rural areas, they go out there, and then you're kind of at a loss because you don't have the quick response times of the police, if at all. And unless you're willing to stay awake 24 hours a day and have a team of people, you're kind of in a bad situation. So could you speak to the idea of rural versus urban, and also is it better to be in a community or a team or be by yourself?
Well, something that happens is that people analyze this and only focus on, okay, I'm going to be in my retreat and I'm going to be shooting everyone that comes around me, and that's going to be my solution to a problem. And that's really not the solution to any sort of problem, and especially it's not taking into consideration everything else. First of all, what people that actually try to do this is that they realize that living in a farm 2 gas tanks away from the nearest town is not exactly the best way to get a job. And I don't know about you, but most people I know need jobs to earn a living, right?
Yeah, there are. There is one group of people, and I've been reading some books about this recently. People that are kind of homesteaders, or they live off the grid for other reasons. They just want to be self-reliant, and those people have every good intention, and they succeed at living off the grid. I guess for them it might look a little bit different, but for the guy that goes and buys a retreat, there's got to be challenges. You got to be able to staff it up, and you need a team of people, and it might be difficult.
That are self-sufficient and are used to growing their own food products and such. They are guys that are already used to doing a lot of this. But the thing is that these guys are not really dealing with any serious type of criminal problem. So that's something that is very particular to USA. The type of homestead living, it's something that you don't really see as much in other places where people can live in other ways, mostly because the crime problem is going to be affecting you a lot. What I see here is that lots of the people that had farms, I talk with them a lot, and they tell me, we have to live all day long watching over our stuff because it gets stolen. And the idea of a retreat being the best solution for a serious criminal problem, a serious collapse aftermath, it's really, I assure you that it's complete fantasy to think that you'll be able to fend by yourself against a very dangerous society. And the best example for this, the best real-world example that this just doesn't work that way is South Africa. I talked with a few guys that came from South Africa, that had read my book and were visiting here in Buenos Aires, looking to leave South Africa because they understood they could no longer live over there because the political situation was against them. The political situation was targeting white farmers as the cause of all evils. So they understood perfectly that it's impossible to live that way, fending off criminals all day long. You're not going to be successful. Over there, already more than 3,000 white farmers got killed, and these guys in particular, they were living in gated communities with heavy security all day long. So yeah, about your question, I think the best solution for that kind of extreme criminal activity, that would be having a community, a gated community of some sort, with enough people to fund serious security all day long. Not just security for looks, not just a wall, a perimeter around the houses, but actual effective security, because they're going to be putting it to test all day long. And we're already seeing some of that over here. Some of the gated communities in the suburbs that had poor security, they were getting targeted, and criminals were managing to get inside and steal these properties, even in spite of that poor security. They had to upgrade that and make it much better, not just for looks, but real efficient security.
Yeah, another thing I remember from your book was this concept, in response to people that feel that they can just arm up and they can take care of anything that way. If you've got kids, and I guess a lot of farmers in Argentina had poor people, kids would come and they would steal grain or they would steal crops because they didn't have anything to eat. Well, you're not going to shoot those people.
Well, I've seen that myself. I mean, I was in a farm when kids were stealing. I think they were stealing some crops and firewood. And what are you going to do? Shoot the kids? Shoot 10 years old and bury them in your backyard? It's complete fantasy and has no connection with reality. And it's just stupid things people may say, but I hope you are stupid enough to actually do.
Here's one for you. I think there's a lot of people that they talk about retreats and so forth, and then you've got people that do this for different reasons. Some people want to homestead. Some people want to just get out of the city and into a rural area because
people that are farmers and have been doing this for generations. Well,
let me ask you this. I have a dream of retiring one day. I don't think it's ever going to happen because the economy is going bad, and I'm a middle class guy. I don't have a lot of money. So it may never happen, but I like to dream. And I thought it'd be nice someday to live where there's the mountains. So I look into Idaho, I look into Utah. If I want to go to Utah and live in a kind of a rural area post-collapse, let's just say that we do have a collapse here, what things do I need to concern myself with, or would you just right out discourage that kind of a thing?
Well, first of all, if you have your nice retreat in the mountains and all that, please invite me because I would love that as well. So
you'll be the first on the list. How about that?
I drop by and stay there for a few days because I mean there's nothing wrong with being a farmer, with having your homestead, with homeschooling your kids. The kind of lifestyle you embrace, whatever it is, it's your choice, and there's nothing wrong with it. The only little thing I say is that sometimes you have to understand that it's not always going to be what you hope it's going to be after a society collapses. Many of these things actually work well because USA hasn't collapsed.
Right.
Many of these things work perfectly well because there's not as much of a problem in USA by now. If you have the kind of crime I'm talking about, it would be very different. And in some places, you start seeing this. For example, in Mexico, close to the border, there was recently a guy, a rancher, that he got into a few problems with some drug dealers, and this guy, he sent home all of his employees, and he stayed there and shot it out with these drug dealers, and they ended up killing him, of course, because only in fantasy do people win against armed looters that are sieging your place for days, and you're on your own. You're not gonna be winning that war. So that's a good example of something that will not happen even if you wish for. About your question, what would I do if I'm in that situation? I would understand that it's all depending on the level of violence you're going to be dealing with. If you have your ranch in the mountains, as you said before, and you're embracing that lifestyle and you're doing well, and also a key point, you have the finances to support that, because remember that some of the first ones to go broke during an economic collapse are the farmers. They're really not going to be making much of a fortune during those times. So if you have the funds and if you find a way to sustain yourself, economically speaking, in that situation, then that's perfectly okay. I really don't have any recommendations for you. I would be hearing yours instead. The only thing I would keep an eye on is crime. I would stay alert regarding what's going on, stay in contact with people that live nearby, other people like myself living in such a situation, the farm next to you, the retreat next to you. Stay in touch as much as you can, and that's something that farmers here do. They watch each other's back, because they only have themselves. They know there's not going to be any police responding to their calls in any reasonable amount of time, and the help is going to only come from themselves.
Well,
if you have, yeah.
Yeah, there's been some horror stories, and not to dwell on the negative, but I guess we want to be informative with people. What are some of the horror stories that you've heard about some of the people that lived in farms?
Well, mostly what they do is, the thing is that they have a lot of time in their hands to do whatever they want. They're not really scared of someone noticing them, or maybe a neighbor catching some of the activity and calling the police or something like that. So they know they have time on their side. The thing is that they know a lot of people here don't trust banks, so there's a good chance they have a cash stashed somewhere, or maybe even gold stashed somewhere in the farm. So the horror stories are very real, and they do get very violent. They start torturing people inside. Usually one of the things they do when they want inside a house of this nature is that they will wait for someone to go outside, maybe go to a town or something like that, or get away from the main building. They catch that person, they put a gun to that person, and with that hostage, they work their way inside, knowing that there's not going to be any resistance.
Yeah, and then the rest is anyone's imagination, I guess, what they do.
Yeah, they. I mean, I've heard of course, rapes, people getting their fingers cut, getting tortured with electricity, fire. Yeah, it's not nice.
Another thing you talked about as well is, when you have a class of society that has been poor and a class that's been rich, there's a lot of animosity. And you talked about people being robbed, but not just robbed, but once they get the money, they shoot them anyway because they have all this hatred and animosity.
Yes, that's very true, yes. And that's something that could happen in pretty much any society you can think of, including USA. The hatred between those that have and those that don't. And again, you have to understand this in the historic context. You have people that have been living their entire life eating out of trash cans, maybe. How is it that they're going to be looking at you? It's pure hatred. And there's always a reason to hate someone. There's racism, there's theological reasons. There's always a reason to find an enemy and hate that person as much as possible. Even if it's just an economical difference, that's enough here in Argentina to hate someone a lot. And that's exactly what happens. You no longer get robbed and get your money. It used to be that someone robbed you and you gave him your wallet. Maybe if he was calm enough, you asked him, just please leave my ID or something like that. And if the guy was okay, he would just take the money and leave you the rest of the wallet. These days, you're more worried about not getting shot just for fun, even if you give up your money. I've heard of criminals that just laugh and remembering how they shot someone in the head and saw all the chocolate as they put it pouring out of the head.
Yeah, we definitely have to remember that there's a wide range of evil in the world. We're coming to our close in the program here, but I wanted to ask you if you could sum up if you had, say, 5 or 10 or however many things you decide that you'd list that people should be doing now in America to prepare, what would they be?
First of all, the basic preparations we all know and often discuss about, mostly stocking up on food, which is still very cheap. It's dirt cheap in USA to stock a lot of food. You have the Mormon canneries that have food for outrageously low prices. You can stock up easily a couple of years on that with little money. Even just going to a grocery and picking up canned goods and other foodstuffs that have long shelf life, stocking up on food and having at least a year worth of food, it's going to be a huge first step. In case of something happening, some natural or man-made disaster happening, in case of you losing your job, one of the first things you see when things like these happen is that you need water to be alive, right? Well, the thing is, water is pretty plentiful and it's pretty much free, so it's not as much of a problem. Housing, that could be solved with a friend or a family member that gives you a room somewhere to live. Now, food, if you don't have food, that's when really the clock is ticking, and that's, as I was saying before, that's what a lot of people realize when they lost their jobs. They lost their jobs, but they say, okay, we still have a bit of money here stashed for some of the bills, and you know, we have 12 months worth of food, so we have time. So that's a pretty big advantage. Stocking up on food, having a couple of weeks worth of water, that would be my first step. After that, having a firearm to protect yourself, because the small petty crime that we were talking about can still kill you, especially as the economy gets worse and people get more violent. So having a firearm and knowing how to use it is going to be of great importance. After that, plan your finances accordingly and see if you can secure your job in some way. Depending on the type of job you have, some jobs are more disaster resistant than others. Some lines of work, for example, construction, is a line of job that suffered a lot here after it collapsed because no one was building anything. So if you're in that type of line of job, you sort of have to see it coming, that yours is going to be one of the first ones to go down when people start getting fired. Also, building up some savings and putting some of those savings into gold, which is the only thing that's going to be safe from hyperinflation. Those would be the 3 points I would be working on mostly.
Yeah, that sounds like some great advice. I really appreciate you coming on the program here, and you know, our goal here is to just get this message out as much as possible. And I would recommend anybody listening to this to purchase Fernando's book, Surviving the Economic Collapse, the Modern Survival Manual, and it's on Amazon.com. Where do you suggest they get it? On the you also have your website, which is themodernsurvivalist.com. Where should they go to find out more?
Well, first of all, they can go to my blog that is currently up, which is FERFAL.blogspot.com. The first one you mentioned, that's where people will find lots of information online regarding many of the things we talked about. And yeah, on Amazon, there's my book, The Modern Survival Manual. They can just go to Amazon and go there and buy it there.
Yeah, well, I read the book. It's awesome, and I've never found that same information anywhere else. So it's truly a unique resource, and I think a printed book for those that think that internet's going to go down or whatever, it's nice to have a printed book. Well, thanks a lot.
I wrote it specifically for people such as yourself and people that are interested in all this, to have a tool to work with.
Yeah, that's another thing too. For people, if our viewers have a friend or a relative that needs convincing about, at least about what could happen and what did happen in Argentina, that book would be an excellent gift and a way to get people to start thinking about reality. But we gotta thank you again for being on the show, and I just really appreciate your insight, and it's very much needed in this day and age.
No, thank you for the interview, and good luck.
Okay, well, thank you very much.